I think our message is that under every roof in America are the dreams that every family has for their kids, for their job, and for their health care, and we're for you. And we just need to do a better job of communicating that.
The other way to look at this is, look, candidates matter. You had a very young candidate, a charismatic one, but he didn't have the longest resume. He didn't live in the district, so that was a challenge.
There's no question millions and millions of dollars were spent in tying the Democratic candidate in Georgia to Nancy Pelosi, and I think that was a significant factor in the final result, but clearly not the only factor.
Republican Karen Handel's victory in the special House election in Georgia turned Democrats into armchair quarterbacks this week. Hand-wringing Dems and liberal Dem leaners had a host of reasons for what went wrong. From the party's message, or lack thereof, to the party's candidate, 30-year-old novice John Ossoff, and some even reached all the way to the House of Representatives to blame the party's minority leader in that body, Nancy Pelosi, her supposedly toxic image weighing down Democrats nationwide. What's often lost in the blame game, however, is the simple political reality of a Republican district that hasn't sent a Democrat to Congress in 39 years. Back with me, Tara Dowdell, and joining me now at the table, joining me now at the virtual table is Jimmy Williams, Democratic strategist, and Jason Johnson, politics editor at The Root. So this is like the perfect panel for this, because I do believe all y'all said he's not going to win. But the main he's not going to win guy is my buddy Jimmy Jam. What happened? You said he wasn't going to win, so do you just want to say, I told you so for like 3 minutes, or do you want to explain to us what happened?
No, it's simple. It's a very Republican district, and it doesn't matter how much money. What is it, 20 million? I mean, the DCCC spent $6 million alone in that district, and they ran ads with Pelosi. Set the Pelosi thing aside. That may have had an influence. That's not my problem. My problem is the DCCC blew its entire, bank account, not bank account, but you get my point.
Yes. On
a race of a 30-year-old who didn't live in the district, who'd never run for office before, against a very bad candidate. And by the way, the campaign put out a post-mortem memo that said Ossoff never went below 50% approval rating. He still lost. So I guess my question is this. Why would the DCCC, which I have a lot of friends over there, spend $6 million on that race when on the same day, about 150 miles away in South Carolina, in the old John Spratt seat, a guy named Archie Parnell was running. He lost that race by 2,700 votes, 8 votes per precinct. And how much did the DCCC spend there? Around $275,000. They sent out mailers, none of which had Archie Parnell's name on them. They did radio, they did TV, they did Facebook, they did all kinds of things. Heck, they even wired $145,000 to the South Carolina Democratic Party, who then proceeded to wire it back to them for some unknown reason. I don't understand that.
Yeah, no,
what I do understand is this. What I do understand is this. The Democratic Party, the DCCC, and the leadership made a huge, massive mistake. They could have elected at least one Democrat last week, and they made the mistake and didn't do it.
Or the other way you could say that is that they lost the Ossoff race. They could have lost the Ossoff race for free, is what you're basically saying. I wanted really quickly, Jason,
right.
because you wrote what I thought was one of the definitive pieces. But before I get to your piece, just the stats, just to give people some perspective here. The Cook Political Report looked at the rating of the Georgia 6 race, and it's R+8. It was a very Republican-leaning district. 71 Republican-held districts have a smaller GOP lean than that, and Democrats need 24 seats to take control of the House. To the point that was just made, the Ossoff campaign put out a memo where they did a postmortem, and their postmortem said the same thing. Georgia 6 is a deep red district. Tom Price was consistently elected by double-digit margins, I think 23 points last time. There are twice as many Republicans as Democrats. There's no path to victory here without a coalition that includes Democrats, independents, and some Republicans. In this environment, John Ossoff outperformed a generic Democrat by 6 points while fighting right-wing outside groups to spend unprecedented sums to hold the seat. Your thoughts on that postmortem?
Well, I thought it was reasonable. There was just one little thing that they were missing, Joy, and that's the lesson that actually could have been learned from South Carolina. There's this crazy idea that, when you want to win an election, you should spend money on your own people and not trying to convince people who don't like you. The Ossoff campaign, if there's one mistake they made, they didn't spend enough money in the African-American and Latino community in Georgia 6. It's not a guarantee that they were going to win, but they left that to a lot of outside groups. Now, the reality is, with so much early turnout and so much attention being paid. Republicans came out and voted early. Right-leaning independents came out and voted early. Ossoff actually overperformed, and you speak to anybody down there, and that's what they say. But they still missed the boat. You need to focus on black men, black women, Latinos, and single people more, because that's the future of the Democratic Party, not a bunch of soccer moms that are never going to vote for you.
I mean, and Jason wrote, you know, and I'm going to come to you on this, Tara, but Jason did write, and it's a great piece in The Root if anybody hasn't read it, white people generally don't vote for the Democratic Party in Georgia or any other southern state. The idea that a coalition of educated suburban whites would actually team up with black voters to send a message to Donald Trump from Georgia was a fantasy created by the blue screen and CGI of outside Democratic analysts who wanted a happy ending to the Trump narrative in 8 months. I mean, Democrats are crying over losing in Montana, Kansas, South Carolina, and Georgia. And they're acting as if there was some way that they could have actually won that when they, to Jason's point, are paying sole attention to flipping white voters who are Republicans.
Right. And so you know where I stand on this, Joy. You know we've had this conversation many times. I am a big believer in, if you cannot maximize turnout, which John Ossoff did. I don't want to miss it. But if you cannot maximize fully turnout amongst your own people, then it is pointless to then try. If you can't convince the people who are already ideologically primarily aligned with you, and just may not be motivated to vote, if you can't convince them, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to convince people who are not predisposed to your positions. So I do think that the thing that the Democrats need to focus on, in my mind, is massive voter registration. And I think that let the outside groups do what they do, but you need to have, your campaign needs to have a process for that as well. Voter suppression is still an issue in this country, and it's not getting enough attention, and it's only getting worse. So you have gerrymandered districts, which are already an uphill battle, and then you combine that with the fact that there are active and aggressive efforts going on to disenfranchise people, and black, brown, Asian, but not just that, white voters who align with the Democratic Party are having troubles. College students are not being able to use student IDs, but yet a gun owner's permit is eligible. Early voting being cut. So there's a massive assault on voting rights in this country, and that's something that Democrats need to more aggressively
Karen
attack.
Handel specialized in that when she was Secretary of State in Georgia. You know, Jason, I mean, to that point, the thing that Democrats do in that vein is they say the word John Lewis, or do an ad where John Lewis appears, or they have Barack Obama cut a radio ad, and then they really don't do anything beyond that in terms of mobilizing black voters.
Right, exactly. It's like, look, and John Lewis is great, and everybody has heard his stories, and he's wonderful, right? But there's this problem, and this is the difference. This is what they did in South Carolina. It was actually very experimental. And let's be fair, if the Democrats had focused on South Carolina, it would have gotten blown out. The reason that they did so well is it kind of snuck up on the candidate. What they decided to do is develop more targeted messages for African Americans. You didn't just talk about the ACA and Obama. You said, look, this affects heart disease, which affects the black community. Turnout has to be specific to the particular people that you're talking to. And all too often, Democrats seem to think that just telling black folk and telling Hispanic, hey, there's an election around the corner, is going to be enough. That is the lesson that should be learned. It's not Nancy Pelosi's fault. It's not John Ossoff's fault. It had nothing to do with him living outside the district. It had to do with the basic facts. And one last thing that people seem to forget, when you pull someone out of Congress to join your administration, you only pull people from safe districts anyway. Trump wasn't going to pull anyone from a purple district.
That's exactly right. Jimmy, you know, and I think that's the other point, too, is bringing Nancy Pelosi into it, first of all, assumes that voters are helpless, you know, are sort of helpless victims of propaganda, that you can just say Nancy Pelosi and they go, oh, my God, I can't vote for Democrats, which isn't true. But isn't it also the case, and you talk about this a lot, that nationalizing these elections isn't necessarily also the way to go either, right? You need to pick the district, figure out who fits the district, run somebody, and spend some money, right?
Well, let me follow up something Jason just said. The DNC did do that experimental, send that experimental money to South Carolina 05, and it worked pretty well. So kudos to them for that. Now, to that point, though, yes, look, Nancy Pelosi, you can blame her all day long. You know, if I have hemorrhoids, please, it is not Nancy Pelosi's fault. If I don't have a date, it is not Nancy Pelosi's fault. However, I'm also never running for an office ever, period, no matter what. So no one's going to be able to blame Nancy Pelosi for that fact. But I can tell you this. In Georgia, that did work to a large degree. In South Carolina, even if South Carolina, the Democratic Party here, had actually spent that money before they sent it back, that money would never have shown up on the FEC reports until the middle of July, well after Archie Parnell had been sworn in as a member of Congress. So the Pelosi effect wouldn't have mattered in South Carolina. It simply wouldn't have. You do have to, listen, Tara's right. Jason's right. Voter registration, calling out suppression, that stuff has to be a priority for the parties. Building parties means building people. If you don't do that, you can't win. And South Carolina failed, and so did the DCCC. They failed immensely in both of these races.
And I love the fact that you guys called out the DCCC because they exist. Nancy Pelosi does not run the DCCC, everybody. She doesn't run the DNC. She doesn't run any of these organizations. It's the DCCC's job to win these elections. And I'll just, one more editorial thing. Spending all that money on TV as opposed to spending it on voter registration and ground game might be a problem too. And by the way, if you did have hemorrhoids, I bet you Nancy Pelosi would send you a designer pillow, honey, because that's how she probably, you know, she's going to send you something.
I already have a designer pillow. I'm more fabulous than Nancy Pelosi. Thank you.
You guys are great. Tara Dowdell, Jimmy Williams, Jason Johnson. I wish you all were here to take the post show. Take a selfie with me. Coming up.